The Ottoman Sultanate, 1299–1922 as an empire, 1922–1924 as caliphate only, also referred to as the Ottoman Empire, written in Turkish as Osmanlı Devleti, was a Turkic imperial state that was conceived by and named after Osman, L. 1258–1326, an Anatolian chieftain. At its peak in the 16th and 17th centuries, the empire controlled vast stretches including Anatolia, southwestern Europe, mainland Greece, the Balkans, parts of northern Iraq, Azerbaijan, Syria, Palestine, parts of the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, and parts of the North African Strip, in addition to the major Mediterranean islands of Rhodes, Cyprus, and Crete. Renowned the strongest military superpower of its time, the empire stagnated and faced prolonged decline from the late 16th century CE onwards until it was replaced by the modern Republic of Turkey after the First World War, 1914–1918. Rise, zenith and fall of the Ottoman Empire. In the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks, a people from the Asian steppe who had accepted the Sunni version of Islam, swept over Persia and neighboring eastern territories and then advanced westwards towards Anatolia. There, they dealt the imperial forces of the Byzantine Empire, 330–1453, a devastating defeat near Manzikert in 1071, and henceforth several Turkic tribes settled the region. By the end of the 13th century, the various Anatolian beyliks, petty kingdoms, were virtually independent but feuding amongst each other. Osman, r. 1299–1326, the Bey, chieftain, of Bithynia, a region situated westwards, near the Sea of Marmara, initiated a war with the bordering Byzantine realm, expanding his domains at their expense and laying siege to Prusa, Bursa, which fell after his death in 1326. Osman's successors swept over the Byzantine holdings in Anatolia and Europe, even taking over the Balkans by the close of the 14th century. The Europeans made vehement attempts to fight off the Ottomans but they failed, most notably at the pivotal battles of Kosovo, 1389, and Nicopolis, 1396. The Turks met their match, not from the west but the east, when they clashed with the rival Timurid forces, over a territorial conflict in Anatolia, under the Turco-Mongol leader Timur, aka Tamerlane, r. 1370–1405, near Ankara in 1402. The Ottomans were defeated, and Sultan Bayezid I, r. 1389–1402, was captured. However, the Western powers failed to exploit this opportunity to its fullest, and after a civil war, otherwise known as the Ottoman Interregnum, 1402–1413, Mehmed I, r. 1413–1421, a son of Bayezid, emerged victorious as the unrivaled ruler of the unified Ottoman realm, and for this, he is often dubbed as the second founder of the empire. Having restored the empire's borders as they were before the Battle of Ankara, the Ottomans appeared before the legendary Theodosian walls of Constantinople, the last bastion of the Byzantine Empire, in 1453, under Mehmed II the Conqueror, 1451–1481, a grandson of Mehmed I. After the fall of Constantinople, which became the new Ottoman capital, Mehmed launched several military campaigns in both the east and the west. Serbia, Greece, and Bosnia fell under the Sultan's sway, and in the east, Mehmed took Trebizond, Trabzon, in 1461. Mehmed also received the allegiance of the Crimean Tatars, 1441–1783, in 1475, and hence secured the domination of the Black Sea region for 3 centuries to come. The Ottomans turned eastwards under Selim I, r. 1512–1520, Mehmed the Conqueror's grandson, who targeted the rival Safavid, Shia, dynasty of Iran, 1501–1736, and the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, 1250–1517. He dealt a pulverizing defeat to the former in 1514 but did not pursue a complete conquest. The Mamluk realm, however, was engulfed in its entirety by 1517. The latter victory gave the Ottomans access to the Islamic holy cities of Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem, allowing them to claim the title of Caliph of the Islamic world. The Ottomans and Safavids, and successive Persian empires, would continue to clash intermittently for the next 3 centuries, and the territories in Iraq and Azerbaijan would exchange hands several times until the matters were finally resolved with a peace treaty in 1847. Selim's son Suleiman I, or 1520–1566, remains the most celebrated ruler of the Ottoman era and is referred to as ýᴏᴜʀ in the east and the Magnificent in the west. He conquered Belgrade in 1521, took the island of Rhodes in 1523, and secured a major and consequential victory against Hungary at the Battle of Mohacs in 1526, which destabilized the region for years to come, and allowed the Turks to assert their dominion over it, competing the Austrians in doing so. In Africa, Algiers had accepted Selim's suzerainty in 1517, and Tunis entered Ottoman rule under Suleiman in 1534. Suleiman the Magnificent died whilst campaigning in Hungary in 1566, leaving the empire in the hands of his only surviving son Selim II, or 1566–1574, and some historians claim that this was the start of the Ottoman decline. The following decades were not devoid of conquests, but the military and naval authority of the empire began to wither. The conquests of Yemen, 1567–1570, Cyprus, 1570, Tunis, 1574, Fez in Morocco, 1578, Crete, 1669, and Podolia in modern-day Ukraine, 1672, proved to be the last major additions to the Ottoman realm. In 1683, the Ottoman army faced a devastating defeat at the walls of Vienna and, consequently, lost its military prestige. In 1699, the Ottoman Empire was forced to sue for peace in the face of a collective invasion. The Treaty of Karlowitz, 1699, forced the Turks to give up vast swaths of European territory to Austria, Poland, Russia, and Venice. This territorial loss was merely a prelude for a century-long episode to come. The Tatars of Crimea were defeated by the Russians in 1783, hence cutting off the empire's hegemony in the eastern Black Sea region. The Greek Revolution, 1821–1829, established Greek independence, and their example was followed by Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro, and Romania, all of whom broke away from the empire by the end of the 19th century CE. Egypt escaped direct Ottoman control as early as the 1830s and was eventually lost for good to the British Empire 5 decades later in the 1880s. France seized Algeria in 1830 and Tunis in 1881, and the last Ottoman-held African territory, Libya, fell to Italy in 1911. The last autonomous Ottoman ruler to have made any significant contributions to the empires was Sultan Abdul Hamid II, or 1876–1909, who took the scepter amidst the first constitutional era of the Ottoman Empire, 1876–1878, an era of constitutional monarchy, which he put an end to in just 2 years, reasserting absolute monarchical control. Hamid made vehement attempts at modernization, most notably in the education sector, and introduced several technological advancements such as laying down extensive railway systems, but remains controversial due to his involvement in the massacre of local Armenian population, 1894–1896, also known as the Hamidian massacres, which are often seen as a prelude to the Armenian genocide, 1914–1923, that happened later on. Abdul Hamid was deposed in 1909 by the Young Turks Party, a nationalistic and secular political entity which restored constitutional monarchy in the empire, also known as the Second Constitutional Era of the Ottoman Empire, 1908–1920. However, from that point onwards, the sultans became mere figureheads and the empire had started on the course of its destruction. The final nail was struck in the coffin of the empire when it became involved in the First World War, 1914–1918, on the Central Powers side, Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany. The Sultanate was destroyed by the war and officially ceased to exist by 1922. Ottoman military. The founder of the empire, Osman, branded himself as a Ghazi, meaning holy warrior, and led forces majorly composed of such holy warriors, waging Gaza, a form of holy war, against the Byzantines. As the Ottoman realm expanded, new military corps were incorporated into the growing Turkish army. Raider cavalry called the Akin raid, was often employed to scout and launch preemptive raids in the enemy's territory before the main army arrived. The Sipahis were the elite Ottoman heavy cavalry units, well armored and equipped with lances, who were paid with land instead of salaries. The light infantry was mostly composed of irregular azaps, meaning unmarried or bachelor, which they were, who were equipped with both melee and ranged weapons. However, the most iconic Ottoman, heavy, infantry units were recruited via the devşirme, meaning child levy, system, laid down by Sultan Murad, by which children from the Balkans were conscripted, converted to Islam and trained as elite Janissary soldiers, Turkish, Yenisary, meaning new soldier, some of whom would also serve as ministers and leading bureaucrats of the realm. Ottoman-era art and architecture. Architectural masterpieces from the Ottoman era have dazzled and mesmerized visitors for centuries. The Ottoman architecture draws heavily from Persian, Byzantine, and Arabic styles, intermingling the three to create a unique blend, perfectly embodied in their designs for masjids or mosques, of which several were commissioned by the sultans as they are central to the Islamic belief. Madrasas, religious schools, soup kitchens, hospitals, universities, sultans' tombs are also perfect examples of Turkish architectural mastery. Mimar Sinan, L. 1488–1490–1588, a prominent Ottoman architect, served under Suleiman the Magnificent and his two successors and rivaled the excellence of Michelangelo, L. 1475–1564. Sinan was responsible for designing masterpieces like Süleymanî Mosque, inaugurated in 1557, and Selimiye Mosque, inaugurated in 1575. One of his disciples was responsible for the iconic Sultan Akhmad Mosque or Blue Mosque, completed in 1616. Ottoman palaces like the Topkapi, meaning Cannon Gate, which served as the imperial housing and headquarters between the 15th and 16th centuries, and the Dolmabahce, meaning filled-in garden, which replaced the former in mid-19th century, are also great examples of architectural excellence from the era, although the latter is also an example of the toxic largesse that crippled the empire's economy. Ottoman-era art adorns the pages of several manuscripts commissioned by the sultans. The style, as with the architecture, has been adopted from neighboring cultures. Several miniatures, Islamic calligraphic masterpieces, decorative carpets, tiles, and portraits from the era provide a peek into the cultural values and history of the nation. The Sultan's name was also written in a stylized fashion, known as the tughra, which was used to sign imperial documents. Poetry and music were also patronized by the Ottoman rulers, many of whom were excellent composers themselves. Suleiman the Magnificent would often write romantic verses for his wife Hürrem Sultan, L. circa 1502 to 1558, under the pen name Muhibbi, meaning lover. From the 19th century onwards, European-style music was also inculcated in the court, as exemplified the official Ottoman imperial anthem, composed under the patronage of Sultan Abdülmecid I, 1839 to 1861. These forms of art and architecture allow modern observers to better understand the things that the Turkish people held close to their hearts, and although European influences can be observed in gradual increments over the centuries, one can still distinguish the elements that made the Ottoman Turks unique.